Hey, everybody, welcome to Tip of the Spear. We're out there to get the truth out to this lost and searching world, to take down these false arguments, these false narratives that are out there, to confront that, to be watchers on the wall, to warn the remnant, warn unbelievers about what's going on in the world. And as you know, we bring on people to tell us their perspective on things, how things are going in the world, from a cultural standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, but also from a prophetic standpoint. So with us today is the one and only Jan Markell from Olive Tree Ministries, and we're going to have her on. Thank you, Jan, for being with us.
Thank you, Brandon, for having me.
Yeah, it's always an honor to have you. I look up to you. We all do, and everywhere I travel, everybody knows you. So you are well known around the world, that's for sure.
Nothing I've done, I promise. That's a God thing.
Well, they all love you. We love you. And what we value about you is you're out there still getting the truth out despite all the crazy things that are going on. And you're going to do it until the Lord takes us home in the rapture. And so we wanted your perspective on a few things because, man, you have a wealth of knowledge. You expose yourself to all these things, and we want to glean from that today. So I have a couple questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them.
Sure.
But the first thing I want to start with is 2024 is a big election year, obviously. And we know it's between Biden and Trump. But it's more than just what's happening in the United States. It's what's happening globally. We have, for the very first time in human history, about 40% of the population on the planet is voting in key elections. So the funny thing is, as you know, the evil people at the World Economic Forum this year put out that their number one threat to humanity was not global warming, the global warming hoax that they usually put up there. What they said that their number one threat was misinformation and disinformation, and translated, they're afraid of the truth. So, Jan, I wanted you to give your opinion. Why do you think the World Economic Forum is afraid of the truth this election year? And what do you think they plan to do, possibly?
Well, Brandon, they are such a skullduggery group. And it's not like they're new to the block. They've been around, quite frankly, since, Mr. Schwab has been around since 1971 doing his scheming and all. And I am shocked that only perhaps in the last 5 years have the body of believers become more familiar with them. They weren't being talked about 15 years ago, hardly even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden here in the last 5 to 7 years or so, they're kind of everywhere. And then we see pictures of everyone from rock stars to former presidents up there on the platform with Mr. Schwab. And clearly, this is the number one global outfit on the planet trying to come up with the antichrist plan as quickly as possible. Now, they're not going to be allowed to come forth until it's God's time, but they're trying to hurry that up. So, misinformation, disinformation, I just think they're kind of in a rush mode to get the agenda. And the agenda, and I've been talking about this on air, particularly in the last several weeks, is targeting, as you know, 2030, but now they're even trying to rush 2030 and trying to make it 2028 and 2029, that some of their total skullduggery gets launched. And I think we need to keep our eyes on them and not just keep them in the focus. But by that, I mean what their evil intent is. And that's one world government. It's the Antichrist agenda. Yeah. And are the churches talking about it? Are you kidding me? Never.
No. This is interesting because they're wanting to get control of AI and be able to control the algorithms, especially in an election year. And we've already heard hints of FBI, CIA working with these tech companies to change algorithms so that stories don't come out or the truth doesn't come out, and they suppress different aspects of candidates. Here's the thing. I don't think anything's past them. do you think that we could possibly see more election tampering or something like that from the World Economic Forum? Because they definitely don't want Trump in. They're not about to let him come back in, and they're gonna. It seems like the guy has 90 counts against him right now. You know, they're trying to put him in jail. Do you think the global elites would be willing to mess with algorithms, willing to mess with AI, to change results of what information people are seeing?
Oh, without a doubt. My concern, if I can be just totally blunt here, in talking to some insiders, I mean, my concern isn't that quite as much as my concern is they're going to try to take Trump out. I mean, look, he's not a saint. You know, you and I know that.
Right.
He's got issues galore.
Yeah.
But that's not the point of discussion right now. The point is he's seen as Satan incarnate to the point because he's so effective with kind of mainstream America, the folks, you know, between the two borders, folks in my neck of the woods, the Midwest, not the East Coast and the West Coast. He's just so effective in reaching to the common person, and they're not standing for this. My concern is there's going to be an attempt to do something catastrophic.
You know, I agree with you on that. I've even said, look, they're not above taking some guy out.
Oh, no,
you
not at all.
Or if they can't put him in jail, they're going to do something. And so we're looking at a crazy year possibly with this election coming up. And let me add this and get your opinion about this election year. I was talking to Jack Hibbs about this, and we're trying to get people, hey, you got to vote because, look, they're going to be running algorithms. They're going to do everything they can to prevent an anti-globalist from getting in, whether it's Trump or someone else.
That's right.
But here's the crazy stats, Jan, and maybe you can speak to this. I looked up the stats on Christian voting, and it came out that about 40 million Christians don't even vote, and 15 million are not even registered to vote. I don't understand that. Can you explain why this is the only thing many Christians can do to be salt and light, and they're not even doing it?
Well, I think a lot of Christians are putting their hope in heaven and eternity and all of that, which is great. That is our ultimate hope. But we're not through down here yet, folks. In the meantime, we need to try to make a difference. I don't fully understand that either. I think there's some states, I'm in one of them, where conservatives voting, it's almost an exercise in futility. And I think that discourages a lot of voting. Certainly Californians are going through that, those in New York, et cetera. So we get that. And you're from California. You get it more than I do.
Yeah.
And then I think, we were accused by a guest of Eric Metaxas online very recently. Well, those Christians who are just sitting around waiting for the rapture, they're not interested. They don't take part in anything. They're not taking part in any humanitarian issues or anything. They're just sitting around looking at the clouds, waiting for the clouds to part, and the Lord's going to take us up with him in the rapture. And that's all we're thinking. Brandon, you and I know that isn't true. But there could be a certain segment of Christians that are thinking that way. But those I talk to are saying this: time is so short that I need to be sharing the gospel, winning the lost, getting my own life in order, and encouraging one another, Hebrews 10, more than ever. So just who this percentage is that you're talking about, I haven't met them. I just haven't met them.
Yeah, I mean, the circles that I run in, everybody I know that's dispensational, pre-trib, premillennial, as far as the remnant pastors are concerned, they're totally wanting to be salt and light in the community. You say the famous words, delay the decay, and that's what we're trying to do. And the funny thing is, I've done the stats, and the stats show that only about maybe 17% of this 70% of America that claims to be Christian holds to our even eschatology. So if I look at the whole of who's not voting, it's not the pre-trib, premillennials. It's
Yeah,
more of the all-millennials that seem to be the problem as far as not voting.
I think we need to explain, Brandon, that
Yeah.
this amillennial theology, and it would also be embraced by probably preterist theology, but that's very few people embrace that. But amillennialism is in every Catholic, every Presbyterian, every Methodist, every Lutheran. You name the denominations, and probably 90% of them embrace a picture of the future that's non-literal, that's allegorical, that's symbolic. Whereas you and I are anticipating a literal antichrist, a literal tribulation, a literal rapture, a literal second coming, a literal millennium, etc. They spiritualize all that. Well, what fun is that? You've taken away all the glory of the last days. You've made it symbolic. It really doesn't mean anything. How do you even get a burden for the lost? Because we have that because we're running out of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Your theology controls your behavior.
Yes.
And if you've spiritualized the kingdom and you have nothing to look forward to, they're sitting this one out. Because you're right. If you look at the demographics of who's actually not politically active, it's the people from the all-millennial camp. So you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head. So let me now, using that to pivot on, let's go to Israel. Okay, so we have a problem in this country, obviously, and if Joe Biden gets back in, we already know he doesn't like Israel. And we saw that today. As we're airing or recording today, Joe Biden has given Netanyahu an ultimatum saying, you will do a ceasefire, you're not going to go into Rafah, and if you continue to fight this war against Hamas, we're going to cut your supplies off, we're going to cut you off, and you're on your own on this. This is how critical this next election is, obviously, not for us as U.S. citizens, but for Israel. Jan, weigh in on what's been happening between the Biden administration and Israel fighting this war against Hamas.
Well, the left in Washington, they didn't used to be this way. There was a time when the left in Washington had many who were supportive of Israel and the Jewish people. Somehow that's all waned as leftists are becoming more Marxist than anything else. I never thought I would see this, but my goodness, what's going on right now? I think it started heavily under Obama, and now it's just being extended. It's kind of the Obama-Biden administration. What I'm watching, and Brandon, I think not only is it tragic for Israel, the pressure that's being put on them, you can't do this and you have to do this. And if you don't do this, we're withholding this, or we're taking away weapons, or we're not delivering you weapons, on and on and on it goes. I mean, I just never thought I'd be observing such absolute radical anti-Israel behavior as I'm seeing. There are consequences to you and me and every listener. Genesis 12:3. God is going to bless the nation. God is going to bless the church. God is going to bless the individual who blesses that little land, and he's going to curse those who curse her. Right now, America is one of her primary enemies because of the pressure being put upon that little land to, you do as I say and you do what I say you have to do, or else. And the or else is very, very serious, very serious.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, Brandon or Jan, it's just that Biden's a bumbling idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing, and the people around him are bumbling idiots. I don't believe that narrative that they're a bunch of bumbling idiots. I think you're right. I think there's something a little bit more nefarious that goes back to the Obama days, right? So if this continues, okay, so Netanyahu is now been put between a rock and a hard place because he's got to deal with Hamas, right? I mean, so explain to people why Israel cannot have a ceasefire right now without dealing with Hamas.
Well, if she has a ceasefire, she can't finish the job. Put it in a sentence. She can't take out the balance of Hamas. But I got to say this, Brandon. Hamas is almost it's not the least of her problems, but it's not the biggest problem. Believe me,
Right.
we've got things going on in the north where the rocket power is 10 times more powerful than what Hamas has. Hezbollah is 100 times more sophisticated than Hamas is. We've got activity going on in Syria, in the West Bank, for that matter, in Yemen. Israel really has 7, 8, or 9 fronts right now going on actively. So they just want to finish the job in Hamas and then move on to the other venues. But who's standing in their way? America's standing in the way. Threats coming from America. We're going to withhold this and withhold this. Look, the vote in the United Nations was one day before the bridge collapse in Maryland, Baltimore.
Yeah.
So is there consequences that happen because of that vote in the United Nations? This would be the end of March. And then the ship hitting into the bridge here the next day.
Right.
Is that a coincidence, or was that some judgment based on what we did to Israel in the United Nations? I believe it's the latter. I believe it's judgment based on what. All right, well, that's kind of just a little narrow little picture of one little part of history that what happens when we expand that all? What are we going to have, an economic meltdown, a complete economic collapse based on our treatment of Israel? I think it's possible. We're going to have weather calamities coming up this spring and summer, unparalleled in our history. I think that's possible. I'm not predicting because I don't know. I just know that God is angry when we start messing with his covenant land and his covenant people, and we start threatening them and saying, you can't do this, or we're going to do this. Well, I say any nation doing that, look out.
Yeah, amen. Amen to that. Because the Abrahamic covenant is God's foreign policy, and you're
exactly.
Totally right. Our mutual friend Bill Koenig wrote that book, Eye to Eye,
facing the consequences.
Yeah, that chronicles every time the United States does something to Israel, it reverberates right back in judgment to us. And you're absolutely right.
I have worked with Bill for 20 years. He was my first conference guest in 2002. Yes, 2002. Bill and I looked a little different in 2002. He was young, handsome, dashing, just tremendously good. He still is, but I'm just saying, take away a couple of decades, and he was. The ladies were going crazy at my conference. They really were. So
that's funny.
I appreciate what he has to say, and he documents it. And these aren't his speculation. He provides detail on what he's talking about, and it's stunning.
It is. We had him here at Rock Harbor at our Support Israel conference, and the guy's just full of information. And so, guys out there in the audience, man, if you ever get a hold of his material, Bill Koenig is phenomenal. So let me ask you this again about the Biden administration. It appears to me, and maybe I'm wrong, I want to pick your brain about this. Does the United States have a pro-Iranian, pro-Palestinian policy? What's happening here? Because why? Obviously, Hamas, Hezbollah, these are proxies of Iran, the head of the snake. What's happening in that region? What are we doing strategically over there?
I just jotted something down on my little pad right here about 5 minutes ago, and it says, America is pro-Iran. And that's what it gets down to, is the left is pro-Iran. Now, who in their right mind is pro the leading sponsor of terror on the entire planet? And if they could involve other planets, they'd be the largest in the whole solar system. And yet the American left is pro-Iran. And I say that's end-time delusion, end-time deception. It's end-time calling evil good, because they are trying to call, well, why can't we be friends with the Iranians? If we just understand them, they'll be kind to us. Again, that's the leftist delusion. It's the same delusion that took place in southern Israel, that the little kibbutzim down there were filled with, I can use an old word, peaceniks, because the members of those kibbutzim in the south thought they could be friends with the people in Gaza. And they found out you can't be friends with barbarians. And America can't be friends with Iran. But the American left thinks we can be. And that's very, very scary because it's putting you and me and our loved ones in danger.
Well, and I think you're right on this because it doesn't make sense even from a geopolitical standpoint, even from a common sense standpoint. Like you said, it has to be a spiritual answer to this. Why would you do a deal with the devil? Are you crazy?
Exactly.
You know, the Ayatollahs are megalomaniacs, and what in the world? And then, you know, then you see this push from Blinken and telling we're going to declare a unilateral two-state solution, whether Israel likes it or not. And it's like, wait a second, the Arabs just did a poll on the Palestinian people back in, I think it was December, Jan, and it said like 90-something% of the Palestinians supported what Hamas did. And we're going to try to have a two-state solution? Are you crazy? What has happened? I guess they've lost their minds.
It's the two-state delusion, but it comes back under, I think, the total overall term of end-time delusion. I mean, I think these people really believe it. I think Blinken and company believe what they're doing. They believe it's going to work. It's the leftist delusion, and the left always believes that we can make friends with their enemy. And you would think after 9/11, we would understand it doesn't work anymore. It really doesn't work. Nobody tried to be friends with Adolf Hitler because they could see he was a tyrant and he was going to take over the world. Well, we have an element today that's trying to take over the world, and I'm not so sure we can be friends with him. As a matter of fact, I know we can't.
That's right. And I think Israel knows it deep down inside that they can't put themselves in a security risk like this. They're an existential threat if Hamas doesn't get taken out, or Hezbollah, or even Iran. So let me ask you this, and we project a little bit forward, and we bring it in prophecy. Where do you see this going? Do you see the relationships between the United States widening and getting further apart based on our pro-Iranian, pro-Palestinian policy? And does that lead to that biblical scenario that we know about in Zechariah chapter 12?
Well, I think biblically, Brandon, I think there's several scenarios that are shaping up. Obviously, the most obvious one is that Israel is becoming isolated, Israel alone. Prophesied Zechariah 12. I think Dennis Prager just wrote an article, Israel, the pariah nation. Nobody wants to hear about Israel, nobody, which is predicted in the Bible. But I think some other things are shaping up. Even in recent days, Israel had to strike Damascus. And with precision, she took out one building. It didn't affect the building to the right or to the left, but she took out one building, and that's where the terrorists were. But the point is, Israel's guns are now turned on Damascus, if necessary. If she has to take out a whole section of that city to get rid of terrorists, she'll do it. And we've got Isaiah 17 that's predicting the obliteration of Damascus in some future scenario, some future war, which could happen tomorrow. When I get up in the morning and my mind is thinking, what has happened overnight that's going to be earth-shaking and even catastrophic? Because we're in those days now where things are breaking every few minutes and every few hours. Major things are breaking that align with the Bible. Again, Israel's isolation. We've got the prominence of Iran, Persia in the Bible, Gog and Magog. She's in that scenario in the Bible. Look, Israel's going to have to deal with Iran, but she won't take her out. That's going to happen in Gog and Magog. That's going to happen tomorrow. So they're certainly going to do pinpoint strikes, but they're not going to drop a nuclear bomb on Iran. Iran's got to stick around for Gog and Magog. So if you know the Bible, the current events are a whole lot more interesting.
That's right. So talking about current events, so something just happened. So it's another piece of the puzzle in the prophetic scenario is what Australia just approved. They just approved a digital identification for their people. So explain the implications that if a country goes with a digital identification, what comes along with that? Because that's just not going to stay there. What are they planning on doing with this?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably going to morph into real end-time issues, mark of the beast type things, Antichrist-esque type things. And I mean, with digital ID comes central bank digital currency, which
Yeah.
is a cashless society. It comes the forcing all of us to give up cash, which is going to be traumatic for a lot of people when we
Right.
go electronic, which again, Brandon, that could happen this week or next week. I don't think it will. I think it's several months, half a year down the road yet,
Yeah.
because they got too much to get in line yet. But I think we
Yeah.
need to mentally be preparing for
Yeah.
the cashless society. And it's going to be a shock because they will track everything. You buy a candy bar, they'll know what company of candy bar. Did you buy a Mars bar or did you buy a Snickers bar? They're going to know everything.
Yeah. Right. And Jan, do you think that along with this digital currency, that they're going to copy what China is doing with their digital identification and put a social credit score? And what would that social credit score look like? Explain to believers what that's going to look like.
Well, Brandon, why don't you explain that? Because I'm not sure, but it's going to be ESG.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm referring to.
And I think we need to explain what ESG is.
Yeah.
Right. It's escaping my mind right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, ESG, guys, if you want to know, is what they're planning on doing with a lot of corporations, but it's environmental, social, and governance. Now, what I mean by that is environmental. It means you better be on the ticket to save the planet from carbon emissions, all right? That whole hoax of man-made global warming. The second thing is social. And basically, social means that you better be a cultural Marxist. You better have your diversity, equity, inclusion. You can't say anything against the trans movement or the LGBT movement or illegal aliens coming into your thing, or talk about the government. And then governance means that corporations, schools, whatever, have to include a variety of people that are actually not qualified to have positions and jobs. So you have to have a certain amount of lesbian people on your staff. You have to have a certain amount of gay, a certain amount of transgender people to be diversity and inclusion compliant. And this, my friends, is what you're seeing in China. And when Jan's talking about a coming digital identification, not only does it imply a digital currency, but it implies this social credit score to where they can tell Jan, hey, Jan, we saw you remark on your podcast that you're not for the government, you're not for Joe Biden, and so we're gonna tell you can spend your money X, Y, and Z. And guys, that's what they're mauling after with China. But it's amazing, Jan, that we live in such a time now to where we're seeing the setup of the beast government that will be in the future. It just blows my mind. And here's the thing. Why are the churches so silent on this? Because the scenario, whether you're talking about Israel, digital identifications, digital money, everything's happening at once and everyone seems to be quiet about it.
Absolutely. It's the number one email coming into my office is why aren't the churches... Basically, they say I visited every potential church in my town. I don't know if that's 5, 10. I have no idea. But just to hear the truth, and all I'm hearing is the silence of the shepherds. And I think, Brandon, it comes down to it's a lot of things. I think it's fear. I think there's a concern that there's a kind of a kook factor in eschatology, the Harold Campings that turned people off 10 and 15 and 20 years ago. Edgar Whisenhunt did it in the 80s. They make a fool of themselves, but then in the process, they make a fool of you and me, even though we're not fools. Some people think we are, but these people have put such a mark, a stain on eschatology. The pastors are afraid of it. And it won't grow the church. It'll be doom and gloom coming from the pulpit. No, not the hope of the Lord's return in the clouds for the church. That's not doom and gloom.
Right.
But then again, if you're amillennial, you don't believe in any of this anyway.
Right. Exactly. So let me capitalize on what you just said, because you wrote an article this in your spring newsletter about Under Siege. And so, we have the people wanting to stay away from prophecy because the kooks are involved in that, and the tinfoil hat brigade that's over there. But
Yeah.
then you have the scoffers. And you wrote about that Bible prophecy is under siege and attacked from these types of scoffers. Explain in your article what you were referring to. Where is the scoffing coming from? Where is it? Is it a theology? What's going on here?
It's heavily coming from within the church, from among believers. But again, we get into theology, and if there's one title I think that's so important, it's Theology Matters,
Yeah.
because one's theology really does matter. But the attack is coming heavily from within the church, because either they're doubters, they're scoffers, they consider what we're talking about foolishness. They consider it fearful. It's going to scare everybody. It won't grow the church. We won't be able to build our new add-on because it'll scare people away.
Right.
And Brandon, you know better than anybody, most of these pastors aren't trained to teach this. It's not in their seminary.
Right.
Well, then they're going to have to do it on their own. I wouldn't blame them if that'd be a little bit daunting. They can do it, but it is daunting when the seminaries are silent and they're not training these guys, and they have to come to people like you to learn it.
Yeah. So I don't want to take too much of your time. So
That's all right.
Let me ask you this question, and then this is where we'll head to the end. What can the poor remnant out there, you hear from them all the time. I hear from them. They're desperate for information. They're desperate for, would someone please teach the Bible from pillar to post, or someone talk about prophecy. What do you advise them to do? Because a lot of them they don't have a church. They're stuck.
Yeah. I know.
What can they do?
They need to find one another somehow. They need to find each other, and they need to be encouraging one another, Hebrews 10. And maybe you start by encouraging folks that you meet online, but ideally you need to be meeting with people and uplifting one another, praying for one another, encouraging one another. Just our days are dark, and they're going to get much, much darker. And without that fellowship around you with one another, it's going to become unbearable. So I just think somehow, and some of the things we talk about aren't the most encouraging, but the fact that the King is coming and the fact that our glorious future is planned for us, where there's no more sorrow, no suffering, no crying, no tears, no betrayal, no disappointment, no illness. It's all waiting for us. And the reunions. I've got some people that have gone before me. I can't wait to sit down and talk to them. And that's all we're going to do for eternity. That's all we're going to do. So that's encouraging. Yeah. And I just think we need to keep the picture of our heavenly home and some of the people we're going to see again in our minds. And I think that should encourage a lot of people. What we have here is a broken system because of sin and because of the fall. And it says in the Bible, all of this will intensify the evil in the last days. And that's why Hebrews 10, encourage one another. And that's how I would encourage everybody, is that they would be somehow encouraging one another. Have a home Bible study. If you can't find a church, invite 3, 4, 5 people in. Start small. You might expand. Who knows? You might have 10, 15 people over time. But do something to be sharing with one another, encouraging one another, and teaching one another.
Amen. Amen. Good words of advice right there, folks. Now, Jan, I can't hardly imagine someone would be new to your ministry, but if they are, how do they find you? What kinds of activities are you doing? Are you doing podcasts, or what do you got going on in your ministry?
Well, Olive Tree Ministries put that together a number of years ago. We went on radio in 2001. We're on 1,000 radio stations, and then we're on electronically all over the world. Understanding the Times Radio, and you're one of my most frequent guests. You didn't ask me to say that, but I will anyway. I love to have Brandon on because he's so passionate about what he believes and articulate. I've done conferences for 20 years, and whenever this program is airing, we're having a one-night conference Thursday, April the 11th with Alex Newman.
Oh,
and
wow.
You can log on to markhenryministries.com at 7 p.m. Central, Thursday, April the 11th for Alex. I'll be the host. Mark Henry will be a co-host. We're doing conferences like that, and you've been with us a couple of times.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is get the word out while there's time.
Amen.
Quite frankly, our message is going to be shut down online. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
The free platforms are going to say enough is enough is enough. We're shutting you down. Already good people cannot get their message out as we are.
Yeah.
So time's limited. Time is limited. Let's seize the day.
Yeah, that's right. Seize the day, folks. Take advantage of that. Make sure you have the right information, especially in these crazy, confusing times where the lies are going to be out there like never before with the AIs and all this other stuff in the media. So you guys need to plug into ministries like Jan's. And that way you get the truth. You're on top of things. Jan's on top of all the subjects, all the news, and she can give it to you from not only a biblical standpoint, but from a prophetic standpoint. So guys, you want to make sure you want to tune into that. Jan, it's an honor always to have you. That was awesome. You blew me away. And I'm sure you blew the audience away with all that information that you have in your head. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
You betcha. It's always a blessing. God bless you.
God bless.
And we'll see you next time.
All right.